I'm a little mad we ever got Pokémon Yellow, Crystal, Emerald, or Platinum versions after seeing how good Pokémon Black and White 2 are. Instead of getting a re-release of a game that's 93% the same as the titles before it this time, Pokémon Generation 5's mid-gen release is a proper sequel with a ton of brand new content in it, a world that's actually been meaningfully changed, and it fixes some of the worst things about Black and White 1, while still having an unsatisfying conclusion, but we'll get there. Pokémon Black 2 and Pokémon White 2 came out only a year and a half after the first games, hitting non-Japan in October of 2012. My soda can just fell over on my desk. And while they call themselves sequels, I challenge that label lightly. They're really complete overhauls of the earlier games, reusing all the same assets, but doing entirely their own thing with the game design and the plot. They honestly feel more to me like one of those fan-made overhaul mods like Daughters of Ash for Dark Souls or Enderal for Skyrim. Anyway, hello. My name is Mothy. We're gonna do a retrospective on Pokémon Black 2 and White 2. Really just Black 2 though, because I'm not filming this long game twice, to talk all about their game design, a few things Game Freak got wrong in this one, and then ultimately why this is the best use of your money Game Freak has ever offered us. So crack open a fridge cigarette. We're diving right in after I explain a little change to my usual format. Until now, my retrospective videos on the Pokémon franchise have leaned heavily on my journey through the games to examine the game design through the adventure of my team. I would cover catching everyone I played with and their evolutions and how I handled all the gym battles and boss fights. But that style has a few problems, chiefly that it's super long, forcing me to chop single games into 2 videos. Plus, the editing is extremely fiddly because I need to capture hundreds and hundreds of short little clips. Covering the Elite Four alone, for example, takes like 45 cuts. But most importantly, that format is less focused. It's half of a game design discussion and half of a narrated playthrough, and I think I can make 2 better individual videos by splitting up those 2 halves. And you've stumbled upon the half that's me straight yapping about the game design of Pokémon Black and White 2, with footage all out of sequence in order to support the topic at hand. Congratulations, your instincts are sharp. That other style of video, full runs of the Pokemon games where I follow the team closely and narrate the adventure, are going to be something you still see on the channel in my challenge run videos. That sound good? That said, we still get to talk about the team I ran because the first thing I want to cover in Pokemon Black 2 is Pokemon availability. So, Black and White 1 were very big games with a very big contingent of new Generation 5 Pokemon to populate them. Of course, with so many new Pokemon, they can't all fit in the early game or mid game. Naturally, few species were very, let's call it, unlikely to make it on your team just based on how late the player gets access to them. Durant, Heatmor, Bouffalant, Vullaby, Braviary, Bisharp, and maybe some others. Seriously, whoever gets to Victory Road and then says, you know what my team really needs? A Heatmor. So one thing I hoped Black and White 2 would change is making all of those species available sooner. And I do mean all of them. It's only a few out of the 156, and if we don't get to use them here, we can't rely on them to even show up in future generations. Well, on that front, Black and White 2 let me down. Partially. Durant and Heatmor got moved farther back somehow from Victory Road to the post-game. Pawniard and Bouffalant are still stuck in the late game, though with a lucky Grotto encounter, you could get a Bouffalant on Route 9 a badge or 2 sooner. But Vullaby and Rufflet, or rather their evolved forms, do come much earlier in Black and White 2 through a special encounter. Zorua was not catchable at all in Black and White 1, but now they give you one in Driftvale City for free. And Larvesta was technically available mid-game in Black and White 1, but rough to play with until it evolved extremely late. Black and White 2 lets us directly catch an evolved Volcarona right after Gym 5, so I count that as another species these sequels de-gatekept. Publicized? So, Black and White 2 did not give me all of the latecomer species earlier like I wished for, but sticking Volcarona, Zorua, Braviary, and Mandibuzz in the mid-game was clearly done so that more players would get the chance to play with the species. It's clearly an improvement, but still, I wish they found a way to make all of the other late species show up sooner as well. Aside from just the timing of availability, Black and White 2 gave us 2 new trade evolution Pokemon to play with that were never previously catchable as a solo player. We can trade for a Gigalith on Route 7, 5 badges into the game. This joins the Machamp from a trade in Yellow version, and Steelix, which has been catchable in the wild for, I believe, 3 games by now, as the 3rd ever trade evolution given out to players with no friends. Though, yes, Black and White 1 did have several Water-type trade evolutions fishable in the postgame, but because they came so late, I don't really give them credit for being playable with. Those were more about filling out your Pokedex. Gigalith is technically like the 8th trade evo for a solo player ever, but in practice, I feel like he's the 3rd. Anyway, he's not the only one added in Black and White 2. In the postgame, a lass will trade us an Alakazam. Yep, an actual Alakazam. I feel like Alakazam alone was responsible for convincing a few thousand households to buy a second Game Boy back in the day and another copy of Gen 1 so siblings could own the two games and make sweet Alakazams with each other. Now, that one's much less usable than Gigalith for actually playing the game with, since it comes in the postgame at level 40 when your team is probably at least in the high 60s, and most problematic, the Hippowdon we need to trade for it only shows up during swarms in the desert region. Swarms being something that only change once per day, picking a single location at random from a list of dozens, so it's possible that even in a few weeks of playing, you never get the chance to trade for this Alakazam, even if you do everything you can for it. I didn't get the chance myself over the couple of days that I spent filming Black 2. And yes, they did still bring forward those few water-type trade evos fishable in the postgame. Politoed, Kingdra, Gorbis, and Huntail are again fishable at 5% in one area each, and only within bubbling spots, which can take a while to even spawn. Which is to say, it takes a while to catch any of them. I didn't take the chance to grab one of these water trade evos in my Black 1 playthrough, but I don't want to miss the opportunity twice. So one of the first things I did in the postgame of Black 2 was to rush for the Super Rod and nab a Huntail. I had to ask my Discord which of those available options I was the least likely to ever get the chance to play with otherwise, and Huntail won out. Her stat line is a little awkward, but Swift Swim with Rain Dance and Waterfall is good enough for a lot of situations, and the postgame runs long enough that her erratic growth pattern actually pays off. It took much less XP to level up Huntail than the rest of my team, starting around level 70. Dare I say, the placement of the species is actually well timed. As someone who's only ever been able to play these games in single player, I do appreciate when Game Freak loosens the reins on trade Pokemon. They do still want us making actual trade evolutions too though, cause they yet again shower us with Reaper Cloth, Protector, Upgrade, King's Rock, and all that other trade evolution good stuff, just in case. I'm laughing at myself for putting this in the script so early because it comes off really salty, but Black and White 2 still require us to run a fast, hard-hitting Dragon-type solution. Again, I'm definitely sick of the same type being our endgame opponent for 12 games now. At least we're given some options how to handle dragons. The Ice Beam TM is given out, and Ice Punch can be enough from the Shard Tutor if you need it to be. On my first run, I actually used Outrage on Arcanine, and that did just fine. But I feel this artificial restriction on my team comp game after game to always plan for endgame dragons. I just get a little tired of going, who's gonna have Ice Beam? It just doesn't feel much different from an HM in that respect. It's basically a gear check. Now for something a little less finicky, let's talk about the identity of Pokemon Black and White 2. This is the first generation when Game Freak did not release a third game that was a remix of the initial pair. Instead of Pokemon Gray, we got Black 2 and White 2, the series' first proper sequels. At least that's what they're calling them. Suddenly, it's okay that the Team Plasma quest and content kind of silently petered out in the postgame of Black and White 1. They weren't done telling the story, and they had to leave something open for Black and White 2. But the plot from the first games going into the second doesn't continue that much. The one loose end from Black and White 1 is that Ghetsis is still at large, then we barely hear from him during the whole of Black and White 2, only to defeat him in a single fight at the end of the game. So as far as the story goes, I think Black and White 2 fail as a sequel, or rather shouldn't have forced themselves to be one. Our big Ghetsis fight would have felt better at the end of Black and White 1, since that game just kind of stops. Pokemon Black and White 2 is simply a different Child's League challenge story told within the Unova region. But because there is a plot connection, no matter how thin, not to mention tons of moments when NPCs reference changes to the world done in the last 2 years, Black and White 2 are more fun to play for gamers who have already played Black and White 1. And that's quite a change from past mid-generation games. At least for me, I feel that Pokemon Yellow, Crystal, Emerald, and Platinum all would have been more fun if I had not already played the games they iterate on. That's not because they did anything wrong, just that they're almost the same games. A few changes to the Pokemon we catch, redesigns of 1 or 2 gyms, and a weak new bad guy written into the plot wasn't different enough to ever have those feel like a different game. Allowing Black and White 2 to be developed as a sequel rather than a remix both allowed and forced Game Freak to dramatically change the Unova experience so that it would not feel like a replay of Black and White 1. And while I'm not excited by the plot continuance much, the designers absolutely succeeded in changing the fundamental gameplay to give Black and White 2 their own identity. Adding new routes and towns to Unova was a given for a new game, but they also changed up the order which we progress through the rest of the world in. The first 2 badges are earned in entirely new towns, set in a previously unused corner of the map. Then we take a ferry over to Castelia City, but we hardly proceed in a straight line from there. We're not on foot from town to town anymore. We're taking boats, tunnels, and airplanes to crisscross the map. And the town map is a mess now, having bounced around so much. Black and White 2 had to shake up our journey drastically to justify its identity as a new game, but something else was lost by doing that. Pokémon games have always had a strong hero's journey from starting town to Victory Road that Black and White 2 gives up with its random access travel. We didn't journey through the world like a 5-course meal, we picked at it like a buffet. And more to the point, when I got Fly and went to revisit past locations, I had to mouse around the map for a minute, figuring out where everything was, because I couldn't just follow my line backwards. Of course, it's incumbent upon a Pokémon mid-generation remix game to shuffle up the available Pokémon, and Black and White 2 did an excellent job with this. Aside from moving those couple of late-game species up, Black and White 2 expanded the Pokédex during the campaign to include dozens of previous generation Pokémon. They've done this before, of course, but for the first time here, it's not the same tired, repeated cohort they've been sending our way since Generation 1. We're not choking down Pidgeys, Machops, Zubats, Geodudes, and Merrills. Well, wait, actually they are still pushing Meryl. But from the very beginning of the game, we can catch Sunkern, Dunsparce, Riolu, Coughing, Growlithe, Elekid, Magnemite, and Magby, species that went underused because of late or limited availability in previous games. And you'll note that shortlist included 2 fire types and 2 electric types. For the first time ever, Pokemon skips that sort of tutorial phase where they think the player can only mentally handle normal types early on, with a bit of bug and flying sprinkled in to feel exotic, like a modicum of salt on British food. Instead, Black and White 2, with its big library of interesting, less common, previous-gen Pokemon, added to Generation 5's already big selection, lets the player build the most customizable team ever, both in species and in typage. It shocked me as I was drawing up teams that I could run for this run, how different my whole team might look as early as Gym 3. For this video, I ran Lucario, Dunsparce, whom I upgraded into Cinccino, Excadrill, Volcarona, Gigalith, and Octillery for Surf. But in my previous run, I played with Lilligant, Arcanine, Sigilyph, Jellicent, Scolipede, and still Excadrill. It comes early, and it's so powerful, both in absolute terms and against the meta. Excadrill buys you so much slack to have fun with the rest of your team comp that it's hard not to use. I could even argue that Drillbur is one Pokemon they should have taken out or moved to the late game in Black and White 2 because it was so dominant in Black and White 1, but that's not really the bone I want to pick right now. My point is, Black and White 2 gave us so many diverse Pokemon to play with, importantly, from the start of the game. Giving the player a huge menu of Pokemon to choose from both helps these games feel different from the previous and make them more fun to replay themselves. I just poured a strong cup of coffee, so if I begin to sound a lot more excited, that's why. The most awkward part of designing my team for Black and White 2 actually came down to Surf. Now, I've already celebrated Gen 5 for not drowning us in water Pokemon like every previous game has done. The fishing rod only comes in the post-game, and there aren't any long required surfing routes. I even took the liberty of totally ignoring dive this time. But you will still want surf for a lot of content, and it's awkward to acquire Pokemon who can surf without having surf, or a fishing rod. Surfing is a paradox because if you have a surfer, you can easily catch more surfers, but if you don't, you need to catch one on land somehow. And the list of terrestrially caught Pokemon who can learn Surf is rather short in Black and White 2. It's probably how they justified another Meryl appearance. Side note, catchable Eevees into Vaporeon? Great call. Took long enough to see this. Since your options for a first Surfer are so few, Oshawott heavily recommends itself as your starter Pokemon, just so you're not hunting for a throwaway surfing Audino later on. I won't go so far as to say I miss fishing for this reason, but in lieu of that, I would have asked the game to give us a gift of some surfing Pokemon just to save us from the pressure to run Oshawott for HM reasons alone. Okay, new topic. The UI got some improvements in Black and White 2. I know I've sounded crazy to y'all before, crying wolf on bad UI design in Pokemon games. I can't help it, it was my job. If you're a plumber, you're gonna notice when people's toilets aren't installed right. Black and White 2 made 2 specific small improvements to the UI that leave it much less frustrating to play than Black and White 1 was. First, it only takes 2 button presses to attack in combat, down from 3. Your cursor defaults to the attack button on the lower DS screen rather than forcing you to press A first to focus the window, then press attack, then pick your actual attack. The most common workflow in any software should have 0 friction, so it's crazy that spamming your first attack to clear a fight quickly ever took 3 button presses. Heck, 2 is still too many. I wouldn't mind if your cursor's already on your first attack when combat begins, but 2 presses is a lot better than 3 from the last game. The other big UI improvement I want to call out is cursor memory in your bag that persists forever, and it's independent on each tab. The game remembers that on the item tab, your cursor usually lives somewhere near the bottom from swapping around held items, and you won't have to scroll too far to do that next time. Then if I go over to the medicine tab, the cursor on that tab remembers that the last thing I used was a fresh water 20 minutes ago, and fresh water is still selected. Doesn't matter if I saved my game in between, got into battles, changed maps, or flew around. And if I move over to berries, it remembers that I only go there occasionally for cheap paralysis cures, and cherry berry is still queued up. Bag cursor memory and reduced button presses to attack in battle make a big difference in a game where you're taking these actions hundreds of times, so I'm happy Game Freak was working to improve the engine in these games and not just the content. Though it's insane that it still takes 3 button presses to open your team menu from the overworld. That's criminal. Pokemon does still have a lot of room for UI improvement. One final thing about the user experience. The game is hand-holdy at the start. But all Pokemon games are, so that's not exactly what I'm calling out here. After pulling you by the nose for the first few tutorial towns, though, Pokémon Black and White 2 dump you in the gigantic, content-rich Castelia City, handing you the steering wheel and saying, good luck. After splashing around in the kiddie pool for 2 hours, we're thrown in the deep end. It's a little jarring going from tightly scripted, heavily tutorialized start of game straight into the biggest city in the game, with access to Route 4, the sewers, part of Relic Passage, Survey Company, Royal Unova Cruises, Battle Company, and Funfest missions all at once. Oh yeah. Funfest missions. Black and White 2 added short, timed minigame missions where the player runs around accumulating points and loot that they get to keep. Ideally, they're done in multiplayer with everyone scoring together, but we get a dozen or so Funfest missions throughout the game that can still be run solo and farmed if you want to. My first reaction to this was disbelief. Doesn't it break the game if we can just farm for items? Some of these missions pass out evolution stones, pearls, the good berries, heart scales, or niche Pokeballs. But like, this is a JRPG. Grinding does make you overpowered in a game like this. And grinding is usually kept in check because your time is simply better spent advancing the game. Pokemon games have always had the option of grinding your levels up against wild Pokemon, and in some games, the VS Seeker lets you refight trainers. But I wasn't used to Pokemon games giving me a solid method to grind money before the postgame, and there hasn't been an efficient way to grind loot until now. None of the Funfest rewards are individually game-changing, but they serve an important function. They let you grind for any of the fiddly consumable items that a committed player might want extras of, especially if they were trying to complete the Pokédex or do competitive stuff, like berries, heart scales, evolution stones, and shards. But Funfest missions played solo are not intrinsically fun, so I only ran a few of them to get a sense for the mechanic and not to grind. But Funfest missions are only one of the ways to enjoy this game. Pokémon Black and White 2 has a large amount of side games to keep you occupied and playing for a long, long time. There's also musicals, movies, the Pokémon World Tournament, and Join Avenue. Let's start with Join Avenue actually, because it's my favorite mechanic, and it's something I've been wanting for a long time. The customizable Safari Zone in Heart Gold, secret bases in Ruby, and the post-game estate they give you in Platinum version all gave tiny little tastes of what it might feel like to have an in-engine simulation game to play inside of Pokemon, and Join Avenue finally makes a full effort in that direction. This is a small linear indoor mall that we can outfit with shops of our choice that are actually useful. I ended up with a beauty salon for haircuts, a dojo for boosting stats and levels, a pair of markets that sold me bulk freshwaters and moo milks, and a flower shop whose mulch I would buy to flip for a profit elsewhere. There's a system for recommending your stores to visiting NPCs that ranks up your stores, bettering their stock and the mall as a whole. There's some light appearance customization you can do at higher ranks, and you even get a few employees to manage, though they're more for role-playing as the boss than they are actually helpful. Unfortunately for me, Join Avenue is not something you can grind out. Only a few visitors come each day, with only 1 or 2 in the early days. Animal Crossing style, or mobile game style, it's meant to be enjoyed for a few minutes at a time, spread out over several weeks. And since I filmed this run pretty fast over only a few IRL days, my mall barely got the chance to grow. I said that like it's a bad thing, but setting aside that daily engagement systems like this can be ethically problematic, forcing progression on Join Avenue to happen slowly over time is a good way to make sure the player still enjoys the campaign instead of screeching progress to a halt so they can grind up their mall. Because I definitely would have done that, and then probably called the game bad for allowing me to do it. There are role-playing games where you unlock a system like this, and the correct thing to do is completely ignore the campaign until you max it out for a prize that helps you more than it ought to. I'm looking right at Final Fantasy, but playing like that usually isn't fun. So yeah, Join Avenue. Cool system, even though filming on a tight schedule didn't let me fully enjoy it, and I would love an even more involved version of this in later games. Musicals are still here. It's a little weird they were kept in, because I feel like PokeStar Studios eats their lunch as the creative minigame. After our second gym, we're forced to film one movie, and then we never need to interact with the PokeStar Studios again if we don't want to. But it is fun, and you should. Each movie involves a gimmicky battle we need to win by sticking to a script. In simple terms, these are battle puzzles. Think of like the judge rules from Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, where we need to win the fight while obeying specific rules. Maybe it's to knock out the opponent's second Pokemon, but not their first, so you have to do something like roar the first one away. Or it's to recover somebody's missing glasses, which means using a move that steals the held item off the opponent. There are small prizes given by fans for filming good movies, like 5 lemonades or a full restore, and if one of your Pokemon gets enough star points by acting in high-performing movies, it gets a special animation when it's sent out in battle. But the prizes aren't the actual prize here. The joy in PokeStar Studios comes from solving the puzzle of how to film each movie correctly. That leaves us with the final side game that Pokémon Black and White 2 added, which is the Pokémon World Tournament. Like the movies, we're forced into one of these during the campaign as a means to demonstrate the mechanic, but then we're able to play as much or as little of it as we want. Well, after a time, because I did have a good time with the one required tournament and went to enter another, but both attendants told me they were still setting things up, so I forgot about it entirely and continued with the campaign until one NPC referenced the Pokémon World Tournament in Opelucid City way down the line. Anyway, all the Pokémon World Tournament is competitive battles in an 8-man single elimination bracket, meaning 3 battles in a row if you don't suck. The prize for winning a whole tournament is a single battle point, which feels stingy when a single choice specs costs 24 battle points at the counter. I'm not sure what flag in the campaign triggered the Pokémon World Tournament to finish setting up, but when I finally revisited the facility, I was able to play a neat style of tournament that they called Mix. We enter this with 3 of our own Pokemon, but before each round, the opponent borrows one of our Pokemon for their team, and in response, we take one of theirs. Unfortunately, I had entered with Excadrill, and the opponents usually chose her because they're smart, so the meta became me struggling to knock out my own Excadrill before I lose my whole team to it, then praying I have enough gas in the tank to tackle their other 2 Pokemon. That didn't go so well. All you're allowed to play here until you've beaten the Elite Four are these exhibition tournaments, which are fun, but without some kind of progression, I didn't want to keep doing them. But once we reach the post-game, the Pokemon World Tournament has a little more content, with a capital C. The tournament has attracted many challengers while we were busy stopping Getsis. We can play a tournament against the Unova gym leaders, then against each other region's gym leaders to unlock the World Leaders Tournament. That's just the best gym leaders from every region, and if you farm 10 wins of that, you get the Champions Tournament, which is against people like Lance and Steven. All in all, it's a sweet, semi-competitive battle format that's a little more appealing to me as a casual than the battle trains are because of the progression and the nostalgia of fighting trainers that I recognize. And that brings us to medals. Pokémon Black and White 2 are huge games, full of content. The campaign is long enough, running longer than any previous games. Then tack on a broad postgame and the various side games we just covered. There's a lot to do. With so much content that we could rudely call scattered or politely call diverse, how do you know when you've really beaten Pokémon Black 2? When does it move from your backlog to the list of games that you've completed? Do you just put the game down one day and have this unsatisfying open end to it? Nope, because Pokémon Black and White 2 introduced medals. They're basically achievements. They're meta progress to track your completion of all of the game's various systems. Now, I love achievements. I think they're excellent as a concept. And I was just going to state that as a matter of fact, but medals in Black and White 2 actually helped me understand why achievements appeal to me so much. In a world of endless access to more video games, I simply won't enjoy an open-ended minigame like PokeStar Studios, for example, that doesn't have a clear endpoint and an extrinsic reward, because I'll feel like my time could be spent on any of the other hundreds of video games that I would like to be experiencing. Adding achievements to a game, or medals, puts a bow on the experience. It's a blessing from the developers that you've extracted as much fun and mastery from the game as they reasonably hope that a person might achieve. At once, they set a goal for you to hit, and then also free you once you reach it. GG. Free up the hard drive space and move on to the next game. I earned 49 of Pokémon Black 2's 255 medals during my filming of this run without really trying to go for any of them. Of the remainder, several aren't possible to earn in single player. Several more aren't possible to earn, period, due to servers closing down. But there's also quite a few that I could grind out fast, like 3 more medals for saving my game a bunch, or 4 medals for getting on and off the bicycle. I didn't even earn the first medal for mounting my bike one time because screw bikes. There's also a lot of medals that could be earned with significant time investment. Filling out the Pokédex, mastering the battle subways and world tournament, filming good endings to all the movies. These are the medals that would make Pokemon Black 2 extremely fun and sticky if I was playing the game back in 2012, did not have adult responsibilities, and didn't have a lot more games that I need to be playing. I do think, given how much content this game has, that medals almost had to exist as well as a logical conclusion. They help you track your progress while being a fun thing to collect in and of themselves, and I'm glad Game Freak introduced them when they did. Okay, that was a lot of meta commentary. Let's talk about the bread and butter of the Pokemon series, raising and battling Pokemon. What did Pokemon Black and White 2 do intra-generation to change the meta? First, hidden abilities got expanded much more. While the concept existed in the last game, there were only 2 hidden ability Pokemon available without doing weird online stuff. In Black 2, NPC gifted Pokemon tend to have their hidden abilities, like this free Deerling on Route 6, or an Eevee you're gifted in the postgame. That special encounter Braviary and Mandibuzz have theirs, and so do every Pokemon you catch in a hidden grotto. Grottos are in plain sight, but hard to visually notice, very small maps you can enter that are 20% likely to contain a special Pokemon, and that Pokemon will always have its hidden ability. Sometimes these Pokemon are exclusively found in grottos, or you can catch them in a grotto much earlier than you would encounter them otherwise. They can even contain rare and powerful species, albeit at a low percentage. Drifloon, Chatot, Bagon, even a fully evolved Dragonite can be caught in grottos. Farming for a specific grotto Pokemon can be unrealistic depending on its rarity, but luckily the game gives out a scripted Minccino with hidden ability Skill Link when Bianca introduces the grotto mechanic on Route 5. Skill Link causes multi-hit moves to always hit the max number of times. It makes same-type Tail Slap monstrously powerful, and the off-type Bullet Seed is basically a one-turn Solar Beam that breaks through Sturdy. With 30 PP, this Cinccino was my water, rock, and ground type coverage the whole game through. But my point isn't how good my Cinccino was, it's that hidden abilities open up unexpected roles and coverage for your team, so it's nice to have a lot more hidden ability Pokemon to play with in Black and White 2 through Gifts and Grottos. Speaking of more to play with, one of my main gripes with Black and White 1 was how they introduced rotation and triple battles, only to give us 3 of those all game. Well, the same way that Ruby had to test the water on double battles for Emerald version to make them commonplace, Black and White 2 has expanded greatly on those battle types from Black and White 1. I didn't count how many there are, but I'd estimate I fought 10 of them all game, lumping triple and rotation battles together. It certainly wasn't too many. We even got something I wished for in Black and White 1, a boss rotation battle or triple battle. Gen 3 had Tate and Liza as a double battle boss for the new format, and in the postgame of Black and White 2, we get a triple battle and a rotation battle with the Shadow Triad. I love to see it, but I still would have liked one rotation battle with more than 3 Pokemon on the opposing team. As a negative, I think these battles should be telegraphed before you initiate them. Double battles you can always spot on the overworld because 2 similar NPCs are standing conspicuously near each other. But triple battles are always a jump scare, and there's decent odds that my second or third roster slot contains some wounded or paralyzed Pokemon that I had swapped there. It would be nice to have some kind of sign on the overworld that the coming fight wants 3 healthy Pokemon. Maybe have the trainer standing with all 3 of their Pokemon, or have triple battles all ask you a confirmation yes or no before battling. That's not unprecedented. We see Charles, Morimoto, and Cynthia all do that. Black and White 2 also added a lot of ally double battles. Fighting with Hugh against Team Plasma, or fighting with Salon against Cress and Chili. These have always been fun, and their difficulty here is balanced better than ever before. No more Lance's Dragonite obliterating low-level rocket coughings. But now, because of all of these, we did get very few straight-up double battles, which are my favorite format. It's a balancing act. Movesets for a lot of Pokemon were overhauled between Black 1 and Black 2. I feel like this was mostly done for the previous generation Pokemon who are now catchable in order to bring their power levels up to modern competition. For example, Sunkern, who's now catchable at the start of the game, its moveset was largely irrelevant in Black and White 1, but in 2, most of its moves are learned a lot sooner. Grass Whistle at level 7 down from 13, Razor Leaf at 16 down from 29, and Giga Drain at 22 down from 41. Only one Generation 5 Pokemon had its moveset altered directly. Bayartic now has Aqua Jet as a level 0 move, learnable only through relearning with a heart scale. I want to hear a recording of that design conversation. What do we really need to push Bayartic into competitiveness? I know, Aqua Jet. But zooming in on Bayartic's new level up move misses a larger point, because every Pokemon in Black and White 2 got new tutorable moves added via the 4 Shard Tutors spread throughout the game. The red Shard Tutor in Driftvale City is the most relevant to your gameplay experience, with the blue one in Lentimus Town also early enough to be impactful. The player's even given 10 red shards as a gift in Nimbasa City to help afford the coming tutor man and convince you of their value. For a red shard investment, you can pick up Seed Bomb or Ice Punch to help you in Clay's imminent gym fight, or several other strong late-game moves to strengthen and modularize your team. There's Fire and Thunder Punches too, Drill Run, Signal Beam, and Iron Head. I used my 10 shards to put Ice Punch on Lucario, which did work all game through the league champion Iris, and with the few more shards I looted, I put Signal Beam on Volcarona, who otherwise pays for its great stat line with a pretty slow level up moveset. Looking back, Platinum version also had added shard move tutors during the campaign, so by bringing them back, we've now formed a pattern, and I briefly want to look at why. Is it purely for fun? To meet the alleged higher difficulty of the later games? Or do the devs think they made a mistake with the balancing of prior games and shard tutors are their way of patching the hole? Or is it simply meant to, along with the updated movesets, add strength to previous gen Pokemon to make them competitive with new gen power creep? Regardless the reason, I think the shard tutors were overall implemented well in Black and White 2, coming early enough and offering good enough moves to be relevant, while also using shards as a currency that they can then offer as a reason for interacting with the various minigames like Funfest and Pokemon World Tournament. Shard tutors form a symbiotic system with the rest of the minigames, and I think it's elegant. This take is going to get some comments, but I had issues with the level curve. Not all game long, mind you. It just gets strangely steep around gyms 4 and 5, Nimbasa and Driftvale cities. The first time I had played Black 2 version casually, I filled up the party relatively early. 5 slots anyway, because I also had an HM slave. There were just so many Pokemon that I wanted to play with, and enemy levels ran away from me. Historically, just by clearing all the trainers as you play and never even needing to fight wild Pokemon, your team will be a couple levels higher than the trainers you're fighting, and you'll land in that perfect range against gym leaders where your levels are higher than their lowest, but lower than their highest. However, in Pokemon Black and White 2, once I reached the mid and high 20s, every trainer was tied with me or even pulling slightly ahead. This is not an unfixable problem. Dark Grass and Audino hunting make grinding wild encounters quicker than ever before, and Black and White 2 also added a couple of Pokemon breeder trainers who challenge you every time you re-enter the area. Those are also good XP pinatas. Plus, right around the time when levels were becoming an issue is when I had access to the sports complexes and Join Avenue. Maybe the designers hoped that I would linger a day or two in Nimbasa City and grab some daily battles to power up before continuing. Actually, I'm sure that's what they were hoping. Black and White 2 feel designed with a speed bump or two in the mid-game just as a way to account for a bit of extra powering up that you might do as a result of the side content. It actually seems balanced to expect that you will halt your game for a second and do some side stuff. The level curve does back off around badge 6, and it stays relaxed after that, even if you are rocking a full party by then. But if you're playing in a rush, the game does feel a little smoother if you limit your party size to only 3 Pokemon until you get your 4th or 5th badge so that the experience points can concentrate. And while I'm talking about level curve, I'm pretty sure Game Freak made a mistake with the Abundant Shrine off of Route 14. Whoever set the trainer fights in here thought that the player would have access to the shrine right away when they reach Route 14 because the enemy levels are right around 40 like the rest of the non-waterfall trainers on Route 14. But they didn't realize that this place is actually gated until the player gains Waterfall at the time of Victory Road. Trainers in here were definitely supposed to be low 50s, like the one Black Belt on the cliffside just outside, who also needs Waterfall. Oops. Now, I'd love to talk over all the NPC Pokemon trades in the game, which is something I've been tracking from generation to generation, but to do so, I first need to cover the Lost Transceiver quest. Except it's not that interesting, so I'm gonna go fast. Starting when you reach Nimbasa City, you can find a lost phone, and by stepping on the correct invisible tiles in the next 10 maps, its owner calls us to briefly chat. After 10 calls, we unlock another phase of the quest where we're allowed to call him, and we have to do so 20 times, except the map we're allowed to place the call from is random, and it re-rolls every time you either call him or load the game, so sometimes you gotta fly around the world and check a few maps to find one you can call him from. Then, after 30 total calls with the phone's owner, whose gender, by the way, is variable, and always the opposite of the player's so that you two can heterosexually flirt and ride the Ferris wheel together, after those 30 calls, and after you've beaten the Elite Four, you can call him once more each day and he'll trade Pokemon with you. Curtis, or Yancy if you're playing as a boy, has 12 Pokemon that they will give you in the post-game, drawn out over 12 days, and you can trade him anything in return. They're all level 50, which is a little low for the post-game, especially if you're advancing and gaining levels as the days pass, but the first couple should not be too hard to integrate on your team. Unlike most trades, each of the Curtis trades has a random nature, gender, and IVs, but they do all come with their hidden ability. and none of their held items are significant. I only filmed long enough to make the first 2 trades for a Mankey and a Wobbuffet, but if I was going to either be patient or manipulate the clock, the Spiritomb on day 8 with its Infiltrator ability looks pretty fun to raise. Or maybe the day 7 Sableye with Prankster, which is a Curtis exclusive. That's right, Curtis and Yancy have different trade pools. 2/3 of their list is in common, like Spiritomb and Snorlax, but others are exclusive to either Curtis or Yancy. So, having explained why this list is going to be polluted with 16 extra trades, let's do like we always do on the channel and rank all the NPC trades of Pokémon Black and White 2. To make these rankings, I always factor in how strong the received Pokémon is to use in the game, if it comes with a good held item, how rare it is, that is to say, could you just catch your own without needing to trade, and how difficult it is to acquire the Pokémon they're asking for. So let's get into it. Early on, there's a trade for Petilil or Cottony in exchange for the other one, based on which version of the game you're playing. This trade comes on Route 4 at level 20, which is nice and early for integrating into your team. Grass type is relatively strong in the meta, with plenty of ground type foes to cover, even though water is less common here than other games. Petulio's ability is Own Tempo, removing the drawback of Petal Dance, and a timid nature with plus speed helps you not miss Chlorophyll. And Fluffy's got a great modest nature. They carry the Power Anklet or Power Weight respectively, which I'm assuming are helpful for min-maxing EVs. Easy trades to make, they're strong enough, meaningful held items, and they're otherwise version-exclusive Pokemon. No reason these aren't top-tier trades. After 5 badges, and positioned well for Skyla's gym if you want him there, is a trade for Gigalith the Gigalith. Now this one comes unnamed, probably because you're meant to believe that this was the Boldore we traded to the same man in Black and White 1. He simply wants takesy-backsies now, and we've got to catch an Emolga at a low rate in Rustling Grass to make the inverse trade. Adamant Nature is great, though I might actually have wished for a defensive nature since he will be one-shotting whatever he lands Rock Slide or Stone Edge on. And of course, Gigalith being a trade evolution means we wouldn't ever otherwise get to play with one as a solo player. For that reason, I ran Gigalith on my team all game, and I did struggle to find good uses for him after Skyla. Every opponent just has Earthquake or Focus Blast or Energy Ball by the late game, and he relies on Sturdy most of the time to get hits in, which is non-repeatable and expensive. The held Lepa Berry is nothing, Emolga is not an easy catch, and he's not that strong, but we gotta give credit for the trade evo, the fact that this trade comes early enough to get some mileage out of, and the careful placement against the Flying Gym. We'll give him a low C tier. Before Badge 8, a Cue-Ball in Humilau trades a Tangrowth for our Mantine. Tangles has a neutral nature and good Chlorophyll ability, but several things hold him back. The held Citrus Berry isn't exciting, he arrives quite late, though before the Water Gym is admittedly good timing, and the Mantine to trade is either a super rare catch, or you evolve a more common Mantike alongside a Remoraid, which is also a rare catch. It's a rough trade to perform, and I don't reasonably see anyone benefiting from this one strategically. I'm gonna have to stick it as a D. That's the only 3 trades before the postgame. The Route 15 Rotom trade for Ditto is copy-pasted in from Black and White 1. This time we can catch the Ditto before the postgame, barely, so we're ready to make the trade as soon as the postgame begins if we're eager for it. Bucky is level 60, on pace with a new champions team, has a good calm nature, and carries a max elixir like last time, which is fine. It's a strong Pokemon, the Black and White 2 postgame is huge, so there's still plenty of content to use it for, and Ditto is a pretty easy catch. I'm not going to take off points for being recycled from Black and White 1 because a lot of this game is top tier. There is one very weird trade in Accumula Town in the postgame, a level 40 Ambipom for our Excadrill. I actually cashed in the Excadrill I'd been raising all game just to make this trade. Ambidexter, cute name, doesn't even have its hidden ability, but Pick Up, carries a Citrus Berry, takes significant grinding to utilize, and also whose team really wants an Ambipom added at this point? I guess if you level it up once, it'll be in the tier where rare candies are uncommon to pick up if you want to sacrifice a party slot for a trickle of loot. This is the only way to get an Ambipom or Apom in these games, but aside from the exclusivity, this trade stinks all over. D. But after we make that trade, the same NPC will then trade us her Alakazam, Beardy. I already covered this one halfway. Level 40 takes a lot of grinding to meet your team at this stage, and when you factor in how many days you might be waiting for a swarm encounter to catch the needed Hippowdon, level 40 looks worse and worse. Beardy does have a good ability and nature and carries a Lumberry, which is decent. The species is very strong and it gets points for the trade evo, but the problems with achieving this trade are huge. And remember, you also have to cash in an Excadrill for an Ambipom first. Strong points both for and against this one average out to a C. And then we have all 16 of the Curtis and Yancy trades. 8 of them are offered by both characters, plus each of them offers 4 trades the other one doesn't, for 12 apiece. Now, I'm not going to give each of these a full explanation, but I'll cover the lot together and you'll understand why I put some of them higher or lower than the rest of the group. Each Curtis trade arrives at level 50, which is usable in the postgame with a little effort, until you remember it takes 12 days to complete all of these trades. Maybe for the first couple being level 50 is good, but the later trades drop in value quickly. Both because your team gets farther and farther away from level 50 and because you run out of content. There's less game left to play the later trades with. So the timing of these trades is the biggest factor for me. They all carry a full heal reskin or a rare candy, and they do come with their hidden abilities, which bumps them all up slightly in their appeal. Each of these Pokemon is only available in this game via trade, with the exception of Shieldon and Cranidos, whose fossils you can get gifted or find in a funfest mission. The only individual Vs that I want to penalize further is Rhyhorn for not being a Rhydon, which could have meant that we get a Rhyperior. Trade evolution Pokemon that aren't at the stage to trade evolve yet are no better than the Everstone Haunter from Diamond and Pearl, and I will die on that hill. Black and White 2 is a weird game for NPC trades. I think that much is evident. The early game grass Pokemon and Rotom, if you nab it right away in the postgame, are the only trades that make much sense strategically. The rest are cool for completing your Pokedex, but they're not really meant to help make your team strong. Trading back for our Gigalith from Black and White 1 is a cool moment, and I do like the new experiment they tested, having the same NPC trade with us twice. We still got better trades here than Ruby or Emerald version, which seem to despise the concept, and these are on par with the mediocre Diamond and Platinum trades. So overall, on the meta tier of tiers for Pokemon game NPC trades, Black and White 2s fall at a solid C. Whew, that was a long topic, so here's a short one. Using HP ups on a fainted Pokemon doesn't revive it anymore and give it a single hit point. Just thought y'all would want to know that. I've definitely cheesed some value before by vitamin reviving Pokemon during the Elite Four. And while I'm covering small details, the male player character option for Black and White 2 is ugly. What is that hairstyle? I had to play as the girl just so I wouldn't be gagging at myself all game. The final topic I want to cover on Pokemon Black and White 2 is a big one, and it's the structure of the game itself. Big picture, what's it going for, does it achieve that, and is it fun, and is it a good game? Well, we're back down to one friend rival after having both Charon and Bianca in the last game. This new guy is Hugh, an impetuous boy rushing to pick fights and get stronger. What I like about Hugh is that he has a reason for wanting to attack Team Plasma. They stole his young sister's Purloin 5 years back, and he wants to rescue it. The stolen Purloin story is not particularly high stakes, but it's personal. We, because we're Hugh's friend, have a personal reason to beef with Team Plasma rather than just getting caught up in a take over the world plot, which is what happens to every previous player character. The twist in this game is that Team Plasma has bifurcated into Getsis loyalists, outfitted in black and portrayed as the actual bad guys, and separatist believers in N who wear the old Crusader uniforms. Hugh struggles to believe in their change of heart, finding it tough to find forgiveness, and honestly, I agree with him. You don't stick a knife in a man's back 9 inches, then pull it out 6 inches and say you're making progress. These plasma separatists need to actively work to heal the harm they have caused. That said, former Plasma Sage Rude correctly identifies that apologizing is a starting point. It's a good lesson to teach in a game, and there's some nuance. But bad Team Plasma is still around doing evil in force, using masked agents to attack our cities with ice, which is very bad guy behavior. They've captured Kyurem, and with the scientific help of a new Plasma commander named Colress, they're using Kyurem's ice attacks to go on full offense to conquer the world. Now, Colress is actually kind of interesting. He's aligned with Getsis as a means to further his science, but they gave him a personality, so he's not cartoonishly evil. He even helps us once or twice early on, gives us an easy battle to preview his Steel-type team, and then it's a big reveal when we discover him later aboard the Plasma Frigate as a boss fight. The showdown with Getsis, which is only slightly later on, is kind of sudden. We just defeat him once and he poofs out of existence for good. They really took what should have been a conclusive boss fight at the end of Pokemon Black and White 1 and stretched into another whole game. Of course, he also has us fight this DNA Digivolved Kyurem/Zekrom combo, which, I'm gonna say it, is jumping the shark for Pokemon. I know the series starts getting funky fresh with forms and gimmicks after Generation 5. The definition of what Pokemon are really starts slipping. Or, getting redefined. Megas, Ultra Beasts, Regional Forms, Gigantamax, and Paradox Pokemon. It's a discussion to have each generation after this one as they get introduced. I'm not ready to take an opinion on whether any of those changes are good for the franchise, but I can say this ugly combined dragon Pokemon feels like the clear beginning of Game Freak playing with Pokemon's identity as a taxonomical kingdom. Morphing together is not something Pokemon do or have done. This creature has the vibe of trying something drastic to make Pokemon shocking and cool again. Gigalith one-shot it. I've alluded to this a few times, but the game is huge. Victory Road opponents in the mid-50s, and the first Elite Four challenge being high 50s to low 60s feels like the latest ever, capping off a long campaign full of many dungeons and densely packed routes. As I said before, I played through pretty quickly to film this video, which had me feeling like a bull moose sprinting through 6-foot snowdrifts. There is a lot of content in this game, and they designed it to take a long time to beat. Now, an upside of this new video format is I didn't feel the need to complete every single small quest, but trust me, I skipped so many pieces of content in order to get this video made before the sun blinks out. Building out Join Avenue, doing the other 10 Curtis trades, breeding Palpitoads to bring a Timpole to one guy in Opelucid City for a concert, catching a Love Disc for a nurse who loves flat Pokemon, catching a Swarm Hippowdon for that Alakazam trade. There's also a woman who thinks the trains are too loud and wants to see a soundproof Pokemon, which I think you can do, but only in White 2 version if you catch a Mr. Mime in a swarm. And so many others! At a couple places in the game, an NPC will ask you to fill out the local habitat list by catching every wild species that shows up there. Now, I did the first one of these for the content, and because I thought I might want a small backlog of trash Pokemon to send to Curtis for his trades. It is a nice way to incrementally get the player working on Pokédex progress instead of dumping that whole project on them in the post-game, but I skipped several more habitat list quests after the first one because this game just has so much else to do. Speaking of the Pokédex, I'm disappointed in Black and White 2 for not even making it possible to see all 297 Unova Dex Pokemon without multiplayer functionality. Black 2 will never see Rufflet or Skitty, White 2 won't ever see Vullaby or Boonieri, and neither version will see the base or the final form of the starter Pokemon that isn't chosen by the player or Hugh. Listen, I always had a bad taste in my mouth for how the early Pokemon games didn't make it possible to complete the decks without buying another Game Boy and another copy of effectively the same game. As someone who despises corporate greed, I would rather just never try to fill up my decks rather than pay more money for the privilege to do so. So I really liked when Diamond and Pearl version had a goal of just seeing all the Pokemon in the Sinnoh decks, not needing to catch them, and it was actually doable by a single player. But Generation 5 reverted to scummy forcing 2 copies just to see all the Pokemon, the prize for which would have been access to the Nature Preserve and a shiny Haxorus. That's all I have to say on it. It's anti-consumer behavior, and Gen 5 slid backwards from some progress that Gen 4 had made. So, because it's not possible to complete the Pokédex, that's not a mission that I even bothered trying on, but Black and White 2 otherwise has an amazingly large postgame that's both miles wide and leagues deep. Something else was lost, though. The Generation 4 postgames and Black and White 1s were adventures. They gave new large regions to explore, and these regions had entry points, places to begin your adventure leading to deeper connected routes and a gradual increase in difficulty culminating in endgame boss fights. Black and White 2's postgame, for worse or better, gives you access to all of its content at the same time. It's a shotgun blast of activities rather than a sculpted adventure. Want to catch Heatran, Cresselia, Latinas, or the Lake Trio? You can catch any of them in a matter of minutes from starting the postgame. Catch up with N to defeat his Zekrom, and then catch Kyurem too so you can own that DNA Digivolved monstrosity? Also something you can do pretty immediately. Specific TM you've been wanting to get your hands on like Earthquake or Flame Charge? Just fly to the adjoining area, walk in, and claim it. What about a final showdown with the Shadow Triad? Sure, it's right here in Isiris City, a short walk down Route 8. Really, the only aspect of the postgame that feels at all gated is the fishing rod, since you have to go claim that in Nuvema Town, which is altogether a little bit far away. But even then, because I really wanted to rush it, I was able to run past most of the trainers and get there in a matter of minutes too. My point isn't to be dismissive. It's not a bad thing that we're given a charcuterie board of content and allowed to graze at anything we want. Pokemon Black and White 2 give a huge amount of freedom to customize your team and pick your activity as soon as the postgame begins. And they did fix the big issue I had with Black and White 1. No matter where you begin the postgame content in Black and White 1, enemy levels are too high. They didn't want it to feel too easy, but the engine lacks a way to scale opponent levels, so they just made everything hard, which meant there was a big initial difficulty jump. In Black and White 2, there are a couple of highest difficulty challenges, but the breadth of content gives us lots of ways to work up to those first. After fighting a bunch of random routes and gaining levels, then there's a Colress final fight on Route 18, Cynthia still fights us in Undella Town, and the Elite Four rematch can be unlocked, but everything else has its difficulty in the low to mid 60s, perfect for picking up where your team defeated Iris. Except for the Unova challenge. This thing is fantastic, and I hate it, and I love it at the same time. It's called Black Tower in Black 2, or White Forest in White 2, but they function similarly. These are 10-level dungeons, the levels individually challengeable that function almost like a roguelike video game. Actually, tell you what, this is just Bloodborne Chalice dungeons. And it's a delightful format that I could have fun playing a whole separate game of if it had some progression hooks and plot thrown in. So there's 10 levels to beat. We have to find and beat the boss to win each level, but first we need to find and beat a random NPC in the area who unlocks the boss gate. And we're not allowed to use any items from the bag, including heals during a level, so don't get hit and don't get paralyzed. There is one doctor per level who will heal your team one time only, so you've got to ration those out and be smart when you claim your heal. For me, PP was usually more of a factor than hit points because I tended to keep my one powerful Volcarona in front and distribute out her XP with multiple XP shares so she could stay in front longer. Besides the boss, gatekeeper, and doctor, there's lots of NPCs who will battle us, then give us one piece of advice, clue style, on where to find the gatekeeper or the doctor. They can also give you hints about the Pokemon that the boss uses. I played very methodically in here and fully cleared every floor of this place because I wanted the experience points so that my team would be strong enough to handle the later floors, because they do scale rather hard. But even if you want to rush through, it can be tricky to find the gate trainer even if you know everything about them. You can learn that it's a male NPC who's standing still in a room with one other trainer, and still bad luck could mean he's in the last room you check. So if you're not trying to full clear the areas, I'm not sure that their system holds up great as designed. The player just needed a little bit more control over completing the area if they already have all of the clues that they should need to do that. Now, I had saved the Black Tower until almost the last thing that I did in this run because I knew it would pump a lot of XP into my team, and boy was that an understatement. I spent hour after hour after hour in here, having a lot of fun, mind you, fully clearing every floor, rationing out my doctor visits, and finally I beat Alder's grandson as the boss of level 10 with my team level in the mid-90s. Just naturally occurring, mid-90s. You get like 20 levels of XP in here. Black Tower definitely got slow toward the end, with levels 9 and 10 taking multiple hours each. I will admit, it got to be a terrible slog by the end, but then again, you're obviously not meant to plow through it in a whole day like I did. You do pick up some patterns that help it go faster, like how waiter and maid NPCs will usually run water Pokemon, so you lead with Cinccino. Or how every other battle somehow has a sturdy Magnezone, so you desperately wish you didn't throw away your Excadrill in a bad trade. But yeah, Black Tower is a lot of fun, but it drags if you full clear it, especially if you do it all in one day. I would have said I played this place wrong, except I did earn 2 medals specifically for fully clearing the floors, so somebody at Game Freak does expect you to play it like this. Maxing out the team in Black Tower did leave me just a tad overleveled for the Elite Four rematch. I ruined the nice challenge for myself, but heck, it's like grinding for Knights of the Round in Final Fantasy VII. If you earn that power, don't let them make you feel guilty for using it. Big picture, Pokemon Black and White 2 improved some key gripes I had with their predecessors. We got more of the new battle types, and several of the late game species were moved more accessible early on. The Plasma plot concludes properly, we got more access to hidden abilities, and there's no weird difficulty hump when starting the post-game. Plus, the tremendous size of the game is worth celebrating. You get a lot of value out of your purchase price with Pokemon Black and White 2, and it's all pretty fun. There are enough different gameplay systems that they escape feeling like filler, with medals as the meta prize helping guide the experience for completionists. And the core gameplay is still solid, well-paced, and challenging. What Game Freak accomplished here is impressive. This game took a lot of design and development work. This came out only a year and a half after Black and White 1, so it feels like they must have already been hard at work on Black and White 2 by the time Black and White 1 came out. Its branding as a sequel still feels a little off base to me because, yes, the world's the same, but in a true sequel, I would expect better plot continuity. The continuity here was cheaply achieved by letting Ghetsis go at the end of Black 1 just so we can not hear from him all game, then beat him in one showdown at the end of Black 2. It's as though they just grabbed the end of Black 1's plot and stretched out the finale to come at the end of Black 2 instead, then had to fill in the gap with nonsense. Instead, they should have let us defeat Getsis at the end of Black and White 1, close that book, and then write an original plot for the sequels where N leads the people against Colress or something. Like Platinum version before, Black and White 2 is great for power gaming. The difficulty is high and the decision space is greater to help you meet the challenge. But unlike earlier mid-generation games, which can be recommended as full replacements of their predecessors, Black and White 2 are not meant for people who haven't played Black and White 1. The plot does not make much sense without having played the first game, the choppy order you visit the world will be even more confusing, and good luck navigating Castelia City when they dump you there early on if you're new to Gen 5 or, God forbid, new to the franchise. But these games do definitely justify your purchase price more than ever. Black and White 2 merely added a whole lot of content for players who already enjoy Unova and wanted a closer relationship with the big batch of new Pokemon. They're also a compliment to Game Freak that they didn't feel the need to release a remixed third game this generation. Unova was nailed from the start, as long as you don't mind the stretched out plot. My personal take is that I had an excellent time playing Black 2 a couple times, but my lingering impression is of its density of battles and minigames rather than my adventure that I had. It's a game that I'm more likely to play the crap out of on one save file than never want to touch again. When I revisit Generation 5 in the future, I'll be more eager to replay Black and White 1 for their more focused experience, referring both to their writing and to their length. Hey, I have big, long retrospectives on the whole Pokemon franchise up until this point that you'd probably enjoy if you like this video. And if you'd rather watch me struggle, I've recently been doing a series of challenge runs where I play Pokemon games with intentionally terrible teams. Turns out Ledian is one of the better Pokemon in Crystal version. Let me know what you think about the new retrospective format, and do subscribe if you want to catch new videos when they're fresh. Probably click the bell too, because we all know the normal notifications are spotty. Thanks as always to my kind patrons for supporting the channel. Links are below for other platforms like our nice little Mothy Discord, and I'll see you in the next video. Mothy out.